Okay, let's dive into this explainer. Today, we're going to challenge pretty much everything you thought you knew about urban planning by exploring the incredibly vibrant streets of Lyari in Karachi, Pakistan. Now, when we think of public spaces in our own cities, our minds usually jump straight to massive, formally planned areas, right? We think of city squares, manicured parks, or big government-funded plazas. But today, we're looking at some absolutely fascinating research that asks us to broaden that perspective. We're going right into the heart of a densely packed, historically marginalized neighborhood to see exactly how a community builds real, lasting resilience literally from the ground up. Right off the bat, the stigma of deprivation that's so often slapped onto informal settlements is completely shattered by this stunningly colorful reality. Picture this: vibrant flags flying overhead, a massive, cheerful smile sign, and this incredible community iftar feast stretching all the way down a super narrow alleyway. The research we're unpacking today shows us that actively used public spaces in the global south offer critical insights into community-led spatial governance. This isn't just some informal gathering. It is a profound, beautiful display of urban vitality that functions with almost zero administrative control. So this brings us to a really provocative question. Is a legitimate public space only a state-owned, perfectly manicured park, or can it be an organically claimed alleyway? Modern planning often relies on this super strict binary between what is public and what is private. But as we'll see, a public space is truly defined not just by who owns the deed, but by the opportunities it provides for shared use, for cultural expression, and for genuine community activity. Section 1. The Resilience of Lyari. To really understand how these incredible spaces operate today, we've got to look at the neighborhood's roots. Lyari actually started out as an 18th century coastal trade settlement. Over time, it grew into a dense working-class corridor, absorbing dock workers, fishermen, and artisans. It's one of Karachi's absolute oldest settlements and is predominantly home to the Baloch community. But unfortunately, its history is deeply marked by exclusion. It was largely ignored by British colonial governance, and that pattern of institutional neglect, well, it continued well into the post-independence era. Tracing its journey from an early coastal port through a genuinely tragic two-decade era of gang violence reveals this incredible community-led reclamation of everyday public spaces. See, from the late 1990s all the way up to 2015, gang rivalries actually took armed control over parts of the area. It made daily life incredibly stressful. But after security operations dismantled that control in 2015, the neighborhood didn't just quietly recover. It roared back. They rebounded through community-led initiatives, street schools, youth sports clubs, and cultural festivals, actively taking back their streets. To really wrap your head around the spatial constraints here, consider this heavy factual punch: 775. That is the number of people packed into a single acre in Lyari's Baghdadi neighborhood. 775 people per acre on tiny plots with narrow lanes. The streets here are often only 3 to 12 feet wide. When you have this intense level of density combined with a total lack of formal urban investment, space becomes an incredibly precious resource. The community literally has to get creative, which leads to these intense, necessity-driven interactions right outside their front doors. Section 2. Dreamhouse, a structured community space. To see how the community reclaims space against those odds, let's look at a place called Dreamhouse in the Shahbag Lane neighborhood. Run by the Dreams of Youth Welfare Society, this formerly dilapidated residence was transformed into a beautiful, safe community hub for education, skills training, and cultural activities. It has this gorgeous courtyard space, an L-shaped structure with an open staircase, brightly painted walls, potted plants, and even pet birds. It creates this welcoming, natural oasis right in the middle of a highly densifying neighborhood that faces constant plot subdivisions. The resilience here operates through formal organization. They use a structured hierarchy to provide a safe, distinct space for different ethnic and social groups. Dreamhouse relies on a highly organized system, a formal 4-level management board, to run everything from a morning school for kids to evening skills training. It purposefully carves out a secure hub specifically for women, children, and older residents. So even though it is technically a privately owned plot, it functions entirely as a highly accessible public asset. It's a real game changer. Section 3. Bambasa Street and its organic vitality. Now, if Dreamhouse creates space behind a safe gate, Bambasa Street redefines the street itself. While Dreamhouse uses a formal administrative board, Bambasa Street is completely organic. It's run by a distributed network of families, local football clubs, and informal norms. There is no single nonprofit managing Bambasa Street. Instead, its publicness is maintained through generations of families and deep-rooted cultural practices that essentially dictate how the street is shared and utilized by absolutely everyone. This space is basically a perfect example of intergenerational continuity. Back in the 1980s, the Baloch Free Tuition Center used this very street to teach kids in 2 evening shifts, operating right between strung-up curtains. Fast forward to today, and that exact same space has been transformed into an explosive hub for World Cup screenings, literally drawing 300 cheering people into a 15-foot-wide alley. The activity completely changed, sure, but the community's collective claim over that space remained completely intact. This is what urban planners call adaptive appropriation. The very same residential walls that were painted as blackboards for the street school back in the day are now used to proudly announce football tournament schedules. The physical structures of people's homes become the literal infrastructure for public life. It shows this incredible flexibility where the community inscribes its current cultural passions directly onto the built environment around them. Section 4, How Informal Governance Actually Works. So how do these spaces actually survive across decades without government funding or formal planning? Well, it's not magic, and it's certainly not random. To figure this out, we can look through the lens of Giddens's structuration theory. This shows that daily actions, like families organizing football tournaments, actually embed rules and resources directly into the physical space. In simpler terms, it's the idea that a community's daily habits become the rules of the space. Every single time a football club hosts a match on Bambasa Street or Dreamhouse opens its doors for an exhibition, they are actively reproducing the social norms that tell everyone, hey, this space belongs to us all. This builds a powerful framework for resilience, proving that community capacity relies on history, shared cultural identity, and the flexibility to adapt. First, there has to be a historical attachment to the place. Second, you need a mechanism to govern, whether that's a formal board like at Dreamhouse or informal family networks. Third, cultural ties, like a shared, massive love for football or education, bind people together. And finally, the physical space must be adapted to actually fit those needs. Through the lens of Agnew's spatial theory, we realize that Dreamhouse and Bambasa Street aren't just isolated accidents. They are vital, interconnected nodes that generate a profound sense of place and identity for the Baloch community. We're not just talking about single streets or single buildings here. They are part of a much wider geographical and social network. The youth who learn at Dreamhouse might be the exact same ones cheering at Bambasa Street. Together, these nodes activate the entire neighborhood. Section 5. A decolonial urban future. So what are the big takeaways for the future of our global cities? Because the lessons we see in Lyari have massive implications for how we plan, design, and manage cities everywhere. It requires a paradigm shift toward what is known as decolonial urbanism. We have to acknowledge that formal state recognition is absolutely not a prerequisite for a legitimate, successful public space. Traditional planning often looks at a place like Lyari and only sees what it lacks, formal parks, wide avenues, state-run facilities. Decolonial urbanism asks planners to recognize and value the informal systems that are already working perfectly well for the people who actually live there. The core lesson here, the big so what, is that we must stop treating informality as a deficit that needs to be formalized or fixed. Instead, we have to recognize it as a brilliant, incredibly resilient response to institutional neglect. When the state fails to provide adequate public space, communities don't just give up. No way. They use their social networks, their rich culture, and their sheer willpower to carve out spaces of joy, learning, and connection from whatever is available to them. I'm going to leave you with this final, provocative thought to help reconsider the untapped potential and unwritten rules of the public spaces right outside your own front door. If a community can transform a tiny, narrow alleyway into a thriving school and then into a vibrant stadium, what overlooked spaces in your city are just waiting to be claimed? Next time you walk down a street, try to look past the concrete and the zoning laws. Think about the people, the daily practices, and that hidden resilience that actually brings our cities to life.